Let's now move on to a top story on the show. Well, tensions between Elon Musk and US President Donald Trump were always lurking in the shadows, ladies and gentlemen. But now the feud between the two is public. From being bros to now, the two have actually turned into foes, given the barbs which were actually traded between the two gentlemen last night. And the fallout is hitting more than just headlines. Well, Tesla, one of Elon Musk's flagship companies, has seen a sharp drop in its stock value, at least 14%, wiping out billions of dollars in investor wealth. So today on the show, we dig into how this high-profile spat could end up shaking confidence in Musk's several businesses and what it means for investors moving forward. To discuss all of that and more, I'm now joined by Wang, Principal Analyst and Founder, Constellation Research. Thank you very much, Ray, for joining us here on ET Now. This spat was a long time in coming, even though this is something that is coming in rather soon, both hitting at each other and hitting each other where it hurts the most. And we've seen the impact on Tesla's stock, but how much further will the erosion of wealth going to be in Elon Musk's companies?
I think this is really up to how each individual handles the going argument that's happening here. This brawl of conversation has to do with many things, but I think on Elon's side, he's really upset. He says he's upset about the tax deal and the overspending, but there's some questions as to whether it has to relate to EV subsidies and the way people are looking at some of his businesses. I think for the president, he did wait for a little bit to see what was going on, but I think he hit back as hard, and I think this is part of the challenge, which is you now have a full-on fight at the moment. What's within and what's at risk is government contracts. There are government contracts with SpaceX. There's government contracts for a lot of work with the Defense Department, and of course, there's the EV subsidies that's on the Tesla side. So there's a lot of consternation about what would happen to a lot of Elon's companies, which depends on a lot of U.S. government funding, especially when you look at the space aspect. To date, Elon's taken almost about $38 billion of federal grants, subsidies, and contracts, and I think that is what people need to remember. Tesla is it's a heavy contractor to the U.S. government at this moment.
Right. So, Ray, even though Donald Trump has hinted at, in fact, this is something that he posted on his social media platform as well, about, taking back those subsidies and grants, but you anticipate that Donald Trump would actually end up doing that, given the fact that, this is then going to be a huge blow to the EV ecosystem in the United States. What do you anticipate?
I think the issue is not necessarily just the EV ecosystem that's going on here. I think it's a bigger piece of the conversation as to what it means for a lot of the work that's going on at SpaceX. That is probably the crown jewel in Elon's empire, and that is the missions to the International Space Station. That's the Dragon capsule. That's the mission to Mars. That's a lot of government contractions, especially for satellites. It's also the Starlink empire that's at risk, and so those are the chips on the table. No fight is good, and two fights among massive egos and billionaires doesn't make it easier.
Absolutely, Ray, but what do you anticipate? Could this feud have regulatory or governmental consequences for real, given the fact that, Elon Musk is operating within several sectors, and like you rightly pointed out, SpaceX is a crucial sector for his overall empire?
I'm not sure. I actually hope they do ratchet it down. They ratchet down the rhetoric, and some common sense will prevail. You never know. These are two highly intelligent individuals with very strong opinions, and I think that's really what's at stake here. But there are, significant government impacts, and especially impacts for investors. And I think that's what investors have to realize, that when you're dependent on the government for contracts, and when you do have a large dependent on the government for regulatory approval, this could impact a lot of things. Right now, there's something in the bill that would actually regulate autonomous vehicles at a federal level, and AI at the federal level. A lot of these provisions mean that the rules that are being influenced and shaped in terms of future tech policy have been shaped in some way by Elon Musk along the way, and other folks, of course, but they do have wide implications. And so you do have to understand that when you get this close to the sun, you have to be careful at sometimes.
Right, Ray, but what do you anticipate, will the two sides end up patching? Because we're given to understand from, several reports that the two sides could have a telephonic conversation. But even if they're not able to arrive at a truce, who out of the two could have far-reaching consequences? Do you think it's going to be Trump or Elon Musk?
Well, at the end of the day, the president is the president, and the consequences that could happen to the president are the support. Elon did contribute a good amount of money to the campaign, brought people into the campaign to help and assist, and of course, that all has an impact, especially for the president's party and what he's trying to achieve. Especially what's on the table right now is the tax bill, and this is all coming down to the tax bill. So the question is, are there specific provisions in the tax bill that Elon is upset with, or is it just specifically the amount of spending that's going on? It could be both, right? We don't know for sure. And I think the consequences that they're there are really about passing the signature item on the president's agenda. So that's what the impact would be to the president, as well as the fracturing of some parts of the party. It is a very tight coalition, and there's not a lot of margin for error. If you saw in the House, it was about 1 vote. And if you look in the Senate, it could impact 3 or 4 votes. Once the Senate, and if the Senate does pass the bill, there's still a reconciliation process, which requires the House and the Senate to actually take their 2 bills so that it can be sent in a way to be passed for the president. That still has not happened. So this is not an easy process. And politically, that's what's at risk for the president.
Absolutely, and that still is waiting approval by the Senate, that big, beautiful bill. But, Ray, what do you anticipate investors are going to do, given the fact that, there is a lot of back and forth happening between both the sides? I mean, we never anticipated that this fallout between the two is going to happen so soon. But now that it's happened, Tesla has lost billions of dollars in investor wealth. How do you think investors are going to shape their strategy or their investment strategies with respect to Donald Trump's companies in the near future?
That is the key question, right? Do you bet on a company with a large personality that could be extremely volatile based on the news cycle, or do you bet on the fundamentals? And right now, investors have had to deal with the news cycle, with tariffs, with other announcements that are policy, as opposed to what the fundamentals are. If you look at the fundamentals of Tesla, it is truly an autonomous AI company. And if you believe in that, you would actually continue the investment and see this as an opportunity to buy the dip, because you realize that in the long run, the autonomous capabilities in Optimus, in terms of the robots, the capabilities that are happening in terms of the ability to do autonomous vehicles and robo-taxis. If you think about the energy business and the battery storage, fundamentally these are critical infrastructure technologies that only few companies in the world will be able to do. So a long-term investor is going to see this as an opportunity to buy the dip. Those are the investors that have continued to weather with Tesla. The short-term news traders and the folks that are actually doing hedging, the folks that are actually doing a lot of options trading on this are going to have a fun time with the VIX and the variability that's going on with this, and that's a different play. So if you're a short-term investor, yes, you're massively concerned. If you're a long-term investor, you might actually find this as an opportunity to buy the dip.
Very interesting opportunity to buy the dip. But Ray, just one final question before we let you go. Is there worry amidst investors that perhaps this high-profile conflict could distract Elon Musk from his business priorities, or could even lead to political and regulatory challenges?
There definitely is headwinds on the regulatory side. What could happen is the EV credits and EV that are in place in terms of the fuel standards could be eliminated. That would mean hundreds of millions of dollars will actually be taken away from Tesla, in the sense that they don't get payments from other vehicles for meeting those fuel efficiency standards. There could be regulatory constraints in terms of how robotaxis are actually being delivered in terms of autonomous vehicles. There could be constraints in terms of government contracts for satellite launches. At this point, it's basically Elon, Blue Origin, and maybe what we're doing in the traditional NASA, Lockheed Martin, Boeing complex. They could try to shift more launches there, but the results at the end of the day is that Tesla has better performance, right? Tesla can launch vehicles at 1/10 the cost, and so that's what's in contention at the moment. So there is regulatory risk, but the reality is, in the long run, Tesla is still ahead in a lot of these industries.
Absolutely, Ray. Let me also get in your view on the fact that, could both the sides have any interest in continuing this conflict, this tiff that we saw broke out last night between the two individuals?
We don't know. With a lot of things, if you look, this is a huge variable in terms of large personalities. But hopefully, there's something in common that they have, or hopefully they get a chance to kind of have cooler heads prevail. It's been an interesting mix of individuals that have been providing assistance to the president. And I would say that in each of these cases, there's large personalities, large egos. They check them at the door when they enter the White House. They understand that the mission is to work for the country and it's not to work for themselves. If you miss that point, then you really don't belong in the White House, because it is about, for any administration, you should be working for the country, not for yourself. And so here's a situation for hopefully cooler heads prevail. People have a chance to connect, reconnect, and re-understand what the mission is, as opposed to where the egos are.
All right. Thank you very much, Ray, for joining us here on ET Now and sharing your thoughts and perspectives on this developing story. Appreciate you taking the time out and speaking to us here on Startup Central.
Take care.